We certainly don't like authority, and we don't like to be told what to do. So, Japan wouldn't be the natural place to be, would it?
Sailor Moon and sumo are the base, the main reason why I'm here right now.
I heard that Santa Claus lived in Japan, and so I wanted to come here and see if I could find the real Santa Claus.
I wanted to learn an Asian language, non-alphabet language. So it was really between China and Japan Japan seemed a lot easier.
After having promised my wife, who was just fiancée at that time, that I had a job and she should come back to Australia, and that job fell through, I felt obliged to at least come to Japan for a short time. And initially I thought 6 months or a year I'd stay here, then go back to my life in Australia. But as time wore on, Japan became more home and Australia became more of a distant memory.
Didn't really have that much life experience, so I wanted to travel around the world first. However, my journey around the world did not continue after Japan, and here I am, 16 and a half years later.
Japan always had a certain exotic allure. It all started with ninjas. When I was 6, the concept of ninjas just seemed so cool, and that kind of was the doorway to being interested in Japan.
I was doing an anthropology class at university. I interviewed 4 or 5 people. Some of them were studying in Japan at the time, and some of them had studied. And just listening to their stories, especially the person who studied here in Kyushu, she's showing me these photo albums, and I thought, wow, that looks really fun. So I came to Japan through that international program at first.
I was doing Semester at Sea, which is a program done by University of Virginia, and you sail around the world taking classes with different professors on a giant cruise ship. We were supposed to dock in Kobe, and there was the Hanshin earthquake, so the entire port got destroyed, and luckily we were able to dock in Osaka. And after that I went to Kyoto for 2 days and got to wander around Kyoto and Arashiyama and stuff, and was like, wow, okay, it's a place I'd really like to come back to.
I suppose it was the idea that there were these really pretty girls that you could meet who were open to make friends with a foreigner who spoke English and get paid to do it, which is mostly true. So I had that idea because David told me. He visited Vancouver, he told me, come to Japan, teach pretty girls, and take pictures and try it. And so I did, and that was 19 years ago.
The very first time I came to Japan was about 15 years ago for my previous job. And I came a few times, so slowly this country started to be very interesting to me. And in that period of time I met a Japanese girl, and then we moved to Italy and we lived almost 8 years together. So I had many chances to come to Japan, so it was a smooth and long approach to the country. So 3 years ago, after unfortunately I broke up with this lady, I decided it was time to try to live in Japan, not just spending vacation or coming here for short visits.
I fell in love with a Japanese man and I wanted to be with him. And I was interested in living in another country, so I said, okay, I'm coming.
I came here to teach literature and Italian language to a university.
In some rather old-fashioned Japanese English, they say, what is your purpose in coming to Japan? I used to tell the truth. I used to say, well, I was kind of economic refugee and political refugee. But I always felt that Japanese people felt a little disappointed. I think they hoped that I would say that I deeply respect the finer points of Japanese culture and all that. So I always felt a bit bad. So I thought, well, what can I say that's actually the truth, but will leave them feeling good? And finally, after a decade or so of living here, I finally stumbled across the correct answer that satisfied everybody. So I think, what is your purpose in coming to Japan? I said, I have a fetish for long black hair. And the Japanese people would always go, I see.
Oh no, there's a foreigner in here.
It's just going to be a one-year trip, but
Come to Japan, teach pretty girls.
Really fun.
It's not a society you can understand overnight.
Five years of theoretical studies is not enough.
I was living in New York and going to school there, and they had a very strong Asian studies program at my university. Then, of course, there's a lot of Japanese stuff going on in New York, restaurants and movies and bookstores and a lot of Japanese people running around. So, I had a pretty good idea of a lot of things before I came here. But, of course, the reality is a lot stronger than one imagines from New York.
I thought maybe Japan was much more crowded than it was, and people were much more rigid and consistent. Most men were salarymen, and most women were like housewives who were somewhat dependent or codependent.
Very nice, quiet, very proper behavior country.
I think I expected it to be something similar to Hong Kong, but more expensive, because when I came here in 1990, it was the end of the bubble economy, and this was famous as the most expensive place in the world. And that was absolutely true.
I always thought there's something mysterious about the writing style of Japanese writers, because it's like they concentrate more on details and they leave big things out. And the sentences always seemed a little bit like metaphors for me, but metaphors for something I did not really understand. So there was a little bit of fascination about it, but I never really thought about Japan in a way like samurai or old history or cherry blossom trees. It was never a very fascinating country for me, actually.
I think my image was of a very ultra-modern, ultra-clean, tall glass spire buildings, everybody incredibly wealthy, the streets immaculately polished. I was a little surprised when I arrived here and found rice paddies on the outskirts of Osaka City, and the airport was not as modern as I thought it should be. I landed in Itami, not the new Kansai airport.
I had more of a high-tech image, slightly more high-tech image, than is actually here.
I had this image of, a very technologically advanced society and stuff like that. The technological aspects are kind of what I was expecting more of.
Pure capitalism and money, and other than that, I really didn't think much.
That they behave very strangely. They have those strange haircuts and they dress. But I didn't really notice that in Fukuoka. They all live like a totally normal. So I was a bit actually surprised by that.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Japan, except for the cartoons, for the manga, because I grew up with that stuff. So I knew some culture from that.
There was one particular image from the TV, I suppose in the 1960s. It was of a young, maybe woman in a crowd in Tokyo. This is an image I saw on the TV, and she was buying air from what looked like one of those old telephones that you pick off the wall, but it had a mask. And she put some money into a vending machine and put the mask here and breathed in some fresh air. They were saying how polluted the Japanese cities were, and then they cut to all this traffic. So the image before I came was not a particularly positive one. I assumed all Japan was sort of full of pollution and people living horrible city lives.
Money handlers at the airport. The way the money changers would fan the money out. Their handling of money was so extraordinarily swift and skillful and artful. It's all about the money.
Coming to Japan from the Siberian area, you go between Hokkaido and Honshu, and you go down the coast. And I saw Japan from the sea. It was very, very beautiful.
A lot of concrete.
I was on the 4th floor, no elevator, going, where's the technology? I'm in this concrete building with cracks in it.
We were prepared for the fact that it was going to be hot, and I was prepared for it, but it was so hot and so humid. Just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do.
My room was small. The houses are all small.
The politeness of everybody, the manner of everybody, how clean everything is, and how well they hide things that aren't clean.
When my plane arrived, July 1986, in Narita, there were still armored vehicles on the tarmac. They actually had water cannons, and these were policemen, but they looked like Darth Vader, and it looked very intimidating. So that was quite shocking. I'd never imagined that.
Everything was my size. You know, like when I was in the bus and I was trying to hold on to the handrails or something, I didn't have to go on my tiptoes or, you know, hold on to the bar, but I could hold on to the railings comfortably. And the cars all looked like little boxes, and I thought that was really nice.
When we came here in 1990, I came to Japan, the bubble economy hadn't quite burst, and so there was money to burn, and all the clubs were busy. The bars were full, and this was a scene for foreign teachers, all different ages, but my first 4 hours in Japan, after 4 hours in Japan, I think, we went to the English-style pub, and I thought, this is so interesting, and everyone was so friendly. There were lots of interesting people and pretty girls and handsome foreign men speaking Japanese to pretty Japanese girls speaking English, and warm and friendly, and I just thought, this is heaven, and maybe I could be someone new, someone different.
Santa Claus almost made it to Japan as his primary residence, but then, of course, sooner after I came to Japan, the bubble burst, and so Santa Claus, he lit out for the territory, so to speak.
For a foreigner living here, there's as well, there's a certain sense of cloud cuckoo land.
I came at 22 and I really never grew up.
Japan has the best toys.
I love shopping in Tokyo.
The compactness is actually really nice.
I can ride my bicycle everywhere.
My friend, she just left her knapsack at a department store entranceway. Of course it was theirs.
You can leave your bicycle unlocked and it may not get stolen. It's quite likely it won't get stolen, but try that in New York.
Actually, I caught a guy once. He stole my bicycle. I followed him and trailed him and then dragged him to a police station. He left in 15 minutes and I stayed for 2 hours trying to explain what I'd done. That really sucked.
It's easy to live. It's so easy to live here. Just, like, for some reason, more than in America.
I think Japan has set a very high standard for me in terms of a lot of things I expect in my life.
The Japan in general is very, very clean.
The train system didn't fail to impress.
When the train says 701, don't hop on the 59 train or the 705 train. Go on the 701 train, because it will be there at 701.
There's nothing major that really annoys me in Japan.
Japan is a fairly easy country to live in, I think.
Just how much little, like, few major problems you have.
Just love everything, the convenience of everything, the way everything's thought out, and their attention to detail is untouchable. It makes everything, I guess you would say, more comfortable.
If you're earning Japanese yen and you go into the rest of Asia, it's pretty nice.
It's got an incredible maze of hiking trails along the mountains and stuff like that that you can get to easily by buses and stuff. And then there's also things that you can do if you've got a car, place going surfing and kayaking, and sea kayaking or river kayaking. There's, you know, because it's about, 75% of the landmass is mountainous, you get some really fast rapids. And then it's also an island, so I mean, you know, it's got swell and surf almost all the time.
Countryside and nature in general in Japan, the southern islands. And this is the part I love the most.
Traveling down to some of the islands down in south of Kyushu, like Tanegashima and Ishigaki-jima. Just insanely beautiful places, and the people are so friendly. It's just like, wow, you know, this would be a great place to live if there was only some jobs.
Before I came, I was living in Ireland and there was hardly any sun. So coming and seeing sun, even in winter, for me, that's good. And it doesn't rain as much. And there are definite seasons. So I'm happy about that.
The seasonal changes in Japan, not necessarily just weather, but the way lifestyle changes and the whole array of events changes is really impressive. From a tiny, tiny detail, you know, in someone's house, like the decorations they have out will change by seasons, and of course stores and menus and everything. It just seems much closer to something natural than 24-hour America, where, you know, nothing changes.
You know, to go back to England, of course, flying through Heathrow. You come into the arrivals hall, and you know, there are policemen with machine guns, submachine guns, whatever, and bulletproof vests, and announcements that your car will be towed away and blown up, and all that stuff, which is just business as usual, everyday behaviour in 21st century Britain, and I suspect much of the Western world. You just don't feel that here at all. There's little sense of potential global crisis.
In a supermarket in Japan, all you need is just somebody to tell you which aisle, but they will run to the place with you and they will show you the item. So I was out of Japan and I was traveling and I needed cereal and milk. So I went and I asked the shop assistant, I was like, where's the long life milk and where's the cereal? So it's like, oh, cereal is in that aisle and I don't know where the long life milk is. And he just turned around and continued packing the shelves. So I literally just burst out laughing because of the contrast, and I was like, yeah.
Oh, another fabulous thing in Japan is nobi hodai, all you can drink.
Like the temple gardens, so, you know, when you get a chance to go over there and see them, very peaceful. It's kind of peaceful.
Japan is incredibly safe, because I've lived here, let's say, 26 years now, which is most of my adult life, I suppose. I take it for granted that I can sort of walk anywhere at night, that my wife can walk anywhere at night. You know, my female friends I don't feel that they need escorting to the bus stop at night, kind of thing. That's a really great thing that I don't appreciate until I travel abroad and, suddenly realise I have to take care of my expensive camera equipment or somebody will take off with it.
I have 4 kids, 4 boys. The oldest is 10 years old and the youngest is 5 years old. They walk alone to school and they go to the playground and they have a good time. And they ride bicycle too, no problem at all. And in Mexico, no way, not even by mistake,
Very safe country. You can feel comfortable and relaxed here. I mean, people are so well mannered here. It's a shame a lot of the rest of the world can't have the same attitude, I guess, towards others.
I have often written about how kind Japanese people are to non-Japanese visitors, which is often not reported. You get the instances of sort of racist behaviour, which often is reported, I think, and certainly exists, of course, but generally I've been treated very kindly.
People are always very polite and very smiling.
I was a bit freaked out that everybody smiled all the time. When I first came, I was just like, why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? It's not that funny. But you get used to it, and when you leave and you realize that people don't do that anymore, then you kind of miss that.
There's so many options. You're not if you were in, let's say, for example, the United States. If you're in the countryside and getting to a place that's going to have anything a Picasso exhibit or, let's say, some sort of festival or something like that, you're going to be driving for a while. Whereas here, it's boom, okay, what's around the corner? And that makes it really, really fun.
There's a lot of fun stuff. I enjoy what's happening in the cultural life.
If you look like you're lost, or if it looks like you're looking for something, people will come and will help you. Or if they don't know, they will try to find a way to help you. And I have that kind of experiences a lot.
Soaked in some hot springs, which I'll never forget.
They adore their cherry blossoms, it's kind of nice to see the enthusiasm. I mean, another tree, but it's on a scale of it all, it is quite pretty, and people get together. It's a good excuse for them to get together, and everyone seems happy, which is nice to see.
We're invited to join this group of salarymen, and later some of the businesswomen came and worked with them, showed up. And we were invited to join them, and they're, have a drink, have some food, don't worry. We're like, oh, should we give you money? Can we go to the convenience store and get, no, it's okay. It's a company party, don't worry. And their department manager showed up, and it was the new employees as well. And so he says to them, right, new employees, you stand up, drink, that whole iki. And so, stand up, and he drinks. And he kind of comes around to us, and he looks at us and says, stand up. So we're shooting back shochu. Right? So everybody's quite drunk, and the department manager, he's really drunk, or not, I don't know. He has a bottle of wine in one hand, a carton of shochu in another, and he goes around pouring it all over his employees who are up and running and screaming, drunk, but having a great time. As it was, they ended up getting so drunk that on that blue sheet that they put out, they started sliding across it on their stomachs, and so there's sushi flying up, fried chicken, potato chips flying. They started rolling. There was a hill there, and they're rolling down the hill in their suits. But so it was a fabulous time. 11 o'clock, the lights go out, right? Hanami time is over. We all just kind of sober up, and they fold everything up and put it in the garbage and go home, and we're like,
I lost my telephone, and 2 days later, somebody called me. They found the telephone, and I went and picked the telephone. And 1 year later, I went to the bathroom and I found a bag with passport, $3,000 cash, a digital camera Sony, and I don't have a camera. I really need a camera now. And I remember, when I lost my telephone, somebody called me, and they returned it. I did the same thing. I'm in my country, maybe I'm gonna keep that money. I'm not sure, but here they teach me the different way.
There's an extraordinary sense of democracy here, in the sense that everyone gets access to the rest of this society. Everyone wants to be part of this society, and nobody wants to be left out. So they go through a lot of effort to connect the shipping systems and the railroads and the bus lines, so that everybody's connected. There's no need to feel as if we are different.
I am sort of anonymous, and sometimes I think I'm invisible, but I'm not. I'm sure people recognize me.
Sometimes being a foreigner in Japan gives you some advantages, because there's the curiosity toward the foreigner, so you're always very welcome to show your picture or be part of some event, because people want to know something coming from outside.
As foreigners, we are cut a lot of slack, I think, especially if you're white. If you're a guy from Bangladesh working in a factory in Osaka, I'm sure it doesn't quite apply the same way.
We like to grumble. We need to grumble. It's a long tradition among the foreign community to get together and grumble about Japanese people or Japanese society, about this and that. And that seems to be a bonding thing. It gets a bit tedious. So there are particular bars you go to when you want a bitch. So there's after-hour work, usually men my age, complaining about this and that. And I suppose it's no different anywhere else.
The term I hate the most that Japanese people use, yappari. It's like, just as I thought, So you're trying, you're more Japanese than Japanese, and then when you screw up, it's I knew it. You're a foreigner. So it gets a little disappointing that way, I know I'm never going to be Japanese. I can wear kimono. I can study Japanese dance. I can speak the language. I could do a lot of things, but I'm never going to be Japanese, and I accept that. However, I would expect a little bit more respect on what I've done. My effort to understand the culture, so to speak.
After 5 years, they still tell me every day, "Oh, you can use the chopsticks, But you see me eating with chopsticks every day, so it's not. No, you don't have to. Oh, you're eating. Oh, you eat fish. Oh, you eat this.
They expect as much from you after 16 years as they do from the foreigner who just walked off the boat.
For me, it's difficult to understand sometimes what Japanese people really mean.
I think in Chinese or English, we say yes or no. It's very clear. But in Japanese, they say, we have to try to think the meaning.
Just the comments that people will make sometimes, like, it's more of a Japanese culture thing. Like, oh, you got fat. Wow, you have such a big nose. Wow, you're so white. Wow, you're so black. The lack of kind of inner monologue that comes out of people's mouths at times.
A long time ago, several things annoyed me. Now, I really can't think of anything that genuinely annoys me. I've either grown accustomed to it, or Japan has stopped doing it.
Bureaucracy. The way things must be done is the way things will be done. There is no concept of negotiation or explanation. You can ask why something is done, and usually the answer is tautological, it is done because it is done. And you're like, but why am I doing this? Why do I have to do this way? And they'll just say, because you do. And you can fight all you want in America. It's all about negotiation. You complain to the boss and something may change, but here it's like yelling at a very old wall. It's not going to move because you want it to.
Here's one that drives me crazy. The Japanese traffic laws sometimes. Like, if I was in a parked car at a stoplight and a car behind me hit me from behind, and in that car there was a child who wasn't in a child seat, and that child died, I could be held responsible for that child's death, legally.
Adaptation of foreign culture just for fashion or just following a style, without the really deep meaning of it, it's annoying for me, because there are some things that I do believe in, and it's hard to see people just taking it like just as a fashion. So.
You go to bakery store and you buy, I don't know, 3 breads, and they pack each bread in small bag, and then this 3 bags into a bigger bag, and then this proper bag for the takeout. So that's really, really annoying, because at the same time they have this very restricted laws about the garbage.
I'm so tired of this situation you have in a Japanese house of sidling along when you pass somebody on a staircase or in the hall, because everything is at least 80 centimeters or less. Whereas in America it would be 90 or 100 or maybe even 110 centimeters. It's a huge difference.
People live in very easy environment, and they don't work like their parents. I think this is the bad thing.
In a small city like Tottori, when people see me, the first reaction is actually distance. Sometimes people stare at you on the street. Maybe they are afraid they have to speak English or something like that. They would be ashamed because they cannot really do.
Well, I feel lonely in Japan anyway, and I don't like it.
Without any offense to the men, the quality of men that you get here, if they're foreign guys, especially in Fukuoka, because we just don't have a lot of people kind of coming in, or they're older and already married because they've met like their wives in Canada or whatever. So you get people who aren't eligible or that you just wouldn't necessarily date, or they're so focused on finding a Japanese girlfriend that like you don't exist. And then if you don't speak Japanese, a lot of the Japanese guys are kind of like not available, and the guys that speak English are sometimes a bit strange.
I like things big. And Japanese, on the other hand, like things small. The smaller, the better.
I don't like that people tell me kawaii or you're chichakao. I hate that.
Oh my goodness, Japan is such highly developed, refined, complex, sophisticated, ancient culture. And I am not good enough to bow down before it. And I have heard this described as a cultural cringe. Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen people, particularly people who come interested in studying things like tea ceremony, ikebana, any kind of the particularly rarefied high art. I understand why you might feel that way. It can be very intimidating, actually. I've been in the presence of people interviewing, for example, there's a very fearsome, actually rather unpleasant character who was very snobbish and very prepared to use his heritage and power, and seemed to delight in making people feel uncomfortable about that.
Surfing's gotten a lot more popular here, so some places you go to, like on weekends, it can be super crowded. I mean, you could be like Jesus and walk on water on everybody's surfboards and never actually get wet.
I can't understand the public art. There's public artists that they seem to the bureaucrats in City Hall seem to decide what art is chosen for the public space, and I think it's very expensive. It's really terrible art. And I saw one in Osaka that I've seen in Kyoto. Same artist.
Shops opening at 11 o'clock. A little bit annoying. But, you know, I don't get up very early anymore, so that doesn't really affect me very much.
こちらはリサイクルの稲葉でございます。
I've read about other people having bad experiences here.
I think every year in about January, February is a bad experience, and I always say the same thing. Next year I'll spend winter elsewhere.
I get in my room and it'd be freezing cold. It was December. It was 0 degrees perhaps some nights. Some nights there was snow, and there was a little electric heater, and I'd huddle in front of that, and then I'd jump into bed, and meanwhile, just a room or two away from me, behind the paper door, was David with the girl he was with that night. I was lonely and I was miserably cold and thinking, why did I leave my ex-girlfriend in Vancouver?
I went to the supermarket and I was going out always with empty bag because I didn't know what to buy.
I've worn my shoes in the wrong place a lot of times. Nothing really bad has happened to me.
Sometimes I have a lot of problems with paperwork because it's hard for me just even studying or trying to translate in every kanji in a big contract. It's impossible.
Not being able to read things.
In a sentence of Japanese characters, if you don't know one, then you cannot understand the sentence.
Once I thought I was buying a body lotion. Instead, it was something to drink. So if I was putting on my body, I was going to sleep. Very sticky.
Koku means country, min means the people, the populace. So, the populace of a country. The min part of kokumi is from a picture. The picture actually contains the meaning. And that kanji character is derived from the image of an eye and a spear being held to the eye. And in the ancient Chinese scheme of things, the kokumin, the public, were those who were easily held down and intimidated by force. So basically it means slaves.
The Japanese mindset is surrender, to surrender authorities.
It's acceptance. I was brought up to believe that we are entitled, of course, to civil disobedience. If I think something is wrong, I can stand up and shout about it and march down the street to say no. There's no word for civil disobedience in Japanese, as far as I know, that is positive. It tends to be the same word that means revolutionary, i.e. bad guy.
Our culture, most people struggle to find out who they are. It's actually very difficult. You always have to fight. You're fighting against yourself, you're fighting against the others, you're fighting to find your place in society. The Japanese people don't have it so much. They are just there, they have their place. And you don't need to ask about it. They accept. So this sounds actually pretty peaceful to me. Because of these things, you might feel very secure. You might feel very safe, like being the part of a group. You can know what the other people want to do. You can understand the other people. So you will not have a problem, so much of an identity problem maybe.
One Japanese person explained it to me. She said that this is a culture of shame. And people are coerced into behaving in certain ways with the threat of being ashamed. That's one of the techniques the police use, is if someone's arrested or caught doing something, the first thing they will do, they'll call family and they'll call employers and say, we've arrested your chief manager for stealing underwear or something. And they use the shame, the communal group shaming. The legal system here, once you're actually caught breaking the law on suspicion of something, I think conviction rates are like 96%, something like that. Basically, once you're arrested, you're going down. So it's actually in your interest to say, yes, I did it, but I realize I was wrong. I've reflected. Please treat me kindly.
There are very, very big issues in Japan too. We can talk, agriculture is a big problem, the fishing is a big problem, some diplomatic problems here with other Asian countries. So many things that people need to care of, discuss and let's do something and let's change this. And I don't see that happening.
I certainly don't trust the Japanese media, mainstream media, TV in particular. There's very little critical media here, unfortunately. Journalistic practices that we have in the West. There's something that looks a bit like it, but it's not a free press. Now, what's happening with bloggers, I don't know. I haven't really heard of any Japanese bloggers who are sort of telling it like it is. Yet. I would hope that something good emerges in that arena. There's no reason why it shouldn't, of course, except there's not really a tradition of it yet. There's something here called the Kisha Club system. And what it is, the newspapers all send their representatives to the government office, and the government makes its statements. It's already pre-prepared statements to the journalists, who then go back home and file their stories with the newspapers. I mean, everyone knows there's a massive problem in this country with discrimination against, let's say, Japanese-born Koreans, Baraka people, to some degree foreigners. But that's hardly touched on in mainstream media. TV is especially bad. It's just sort of lowest common denominator entertainment. It's a big problem for Japanese society. If the government and the law enforcement agencies and the mob all have a kind of cozy relationship where it's not in their interest for things to change, actually. The only way things really could move forward is through an independent, critical press.
Police stopped me and asked me for my alien registration card, but it was just the way they did it, and I was so upset because I wasn't doing anything. And I even said that because I did kind of tell them off. I was just like, look, you can't stop me just because I look different. And they're like, well, the Japanese law says that, and if we came to your country, the police in your country would do the same. And I said, no, in my country that is illegal. You don't stop somebody because they look different, you know. So for me, that kind of brings back very bad memories in South Africa. When I never had to live through that, you know, I'm too young, but in South Africa there were pass laws where you had to carry your pass, you know, and if you didn't have your pass, then basically you got into trouble.
There are people who are kept in what they call detention centres, you know, until they are found guilty as charged, you know, so they may not get to court for a very, very long time. And, you know, the police can use that as an intimidation device.
To many things that I do not expect from a developed country. Yeah, like when it comes to rights, it's not developed at all.
You know, the watchdog committees, the people who are looking to see where there might be abuses of power, simply doesn't exist. There's not a framework for that.
I don't know, they learn in the school a lot about rights, for example, you know, human rights or something like that, but I don't know, they learn maybe, but they never talk or are really concerned.
There's a general belief that the police force can do no wrong.
You know, one time I was riding my motorcycle and police stopped me. They was waiting for speeding people, and they told me it's a sign over there. And if that sign in Mexico, I understood, you know. That sign, no more color already, it kind of rust. But here in Japan, it's very hard to see signs like that, you know. And I went later, like 2-3 weeks later, and they was doing the same thing. So they're doing business over there, you know.
I'm not keen on the degree to which the society is policed. It's verging on the fascist, out of control, dictator style law enforcement organization.
And in the beginning I was impressed about the police, you know, nice uniform and nice cars, and I thought it was everything straight, but I find out exists something a little bit crooked.
I knew the word racism. I didn't know what racism was until I came to Japan, and then actually, I guess, felt the hate myself in a lot of ways towards myself.
Sometimes Italian friends tend to say, Japanese are, what's the word, racist. I don't think it is in these terms. I just think it's a shyness and difficulty to communicate. So the first impression, sometimes a tourist or a businessman who come to Japan can have this image, but after you spend some time here, you realize it's not like that. Of course, maybe some people can be on the bad side, but that's everywhere.
Some of the stupidest things I've ever heard. One of them was, the foreigners come here, work as English teachers, make millions of dollars and take it back home with them. So they're taking the money out of the country. Well, foreigners that I know that work as English teachers are on about $2,500 a month. They can barely scrape through rent, and they spend most of it at the pub.
I happen to be British, right? So a lot of people expect me to have a horse and drink tea at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, speak something which is often termed the King's English, and you know, generally behave as a gentleman, as I put it.
My wife, who I eventually married, we lived together for about 10 years, but until she finally roped me into getting married. But the mother would not acknowledge my existence for the first 5 years.
I was dressed in a suit. I was carrying a small briefcase, And I was walking down the stairs into the subway, and walking up the stairs out of the subway was a like a mid-30s Japanese mother with a couple of kids, and she saw me and grabbed one of her kids close to her and said, "Abunai, gaijin."
There's not so much idea about what's going on abroad. Like people are not very well informed about the situation in the world. Like with any other foreigner, you can talk about pretty much everything, or you can have an opinion about things.
They learn this painting is by this painter and from this year, but they don't learn to discuss it. They don't learn to have an opinion about it.
I do have Japanese friends who like to discuss, but there are very few and they're not the average.
I know a lot of Japanese teachers who would like to implement educational ideas, classroom techniques that they've picked up from the West and can't, because the Ministry of Education is still obsessed with this studying to pass tests. So they pay lip service to promoting conversational English, but it's not real.
From elementary school, going through high school, and people in university, there is like a lot of ideas that I think are not in a proper order for a developed country.
I think Japan has become a little bit more open and welcoming of foreigners. I wouldn't say it's welcoming with open arms yet, but I wish it was this easy when I came here.
There seems to be a much more generalized acceptance of the fact that there are foreigners around. When I first came, of course I was in a very rural community, but everyone would say, gaijin da, gaijin da. You know, there goes a gaijin, there goes a foreigner. And it wasn't limited to just the countryside. It would happen here in Kyoto, a big city. And it hardly happens these days.
These days, more often than not, a Japanese person will start a conversation in Japanese rather than English.
English speaking has got a lot better. When I came here, nobody could speak English, but now it's not uncommon to find good English speakers all over the place. I'm not saying that's because of my work, but you know.
The burst of the economic bubble had a serious effect, but psychologically the sarin nerve gas incident, when Om Shinrikyo people set off the nerve gas in Nagano first and then on the subway line in Tokyo, that really affected people's belief in the safety of Japanese society. I don't think that can be overemphasized, actually.
We had no convenience stores when I came here. There was no ice cream when I came here to speak of. There was no real bread to speak of.
It's illegal now to be even a member of a gangster group. So that legislation actually really took a lot of power away from the gangsters, because they could no longer operate in public. When I first came to Japan and first came to Kyoto as well, they were very publicly present, the gangsters.
in Japan, usually when they prepare food, the food comes in whole, you know, complete with the head and the eyes and, yeah, other things, you know. There's no mistaking what it is and where it came from.
Japanese sake, which I'm drinking a really inexpensive sake you can get at the corner store. And it's okay, it's not too bad, but really it was surprising to me how good sake can be if you get to know it.
We've had some very memorable and amazing and delicious and unusual meals that we wouldn't have had anywhere else.
We went to an end-of-year party with my workmates, and this place was famous for its squid. And they brought a whole squid onto the table. And so it was cut up in pieces. So it was complete, a whole squid. You could see the eyes, and it was cut up all around and stuff. And one of the teachers asked the lady, so is it fresh? And she said yes. And she took her chopsticks and she touched the tentacles and they started moving. I screamed that I didn't expect the food that was already on the plate to be moving. You know, all chopped up but moving. I was just like, wow.
Very well. I like that. I like the sophistication of the cuisine.
Japanese are meticulous about perfecting what they do. There's tremendous work ethic here. And so they create a world in which work is efficient and things go well.
Usually in Colombia, for one experiment, you have, for example, 2 plates. Here people make experiments with 20 plates, 50 plates, and they have no problem. And they're, from the first one to the last one is perfect.
They're just amazing. And the way they focus. People here focus on just like they'll take one small thing, even focus it to perfect it, and it's nice. It's a nice change to what you see a lot overseas, where everybody's a little bit tequito, where they, if it's good enough, yeah, it'll do. But here they try and make it work perfectly. So it's a nice environment to be around. It makes you want to work harder.
Working with Japanese people who helped us to build up this place was amazing. It was a great experience of everything was so fast, so precise, so efficient. I really missed it in Italy when I used to work there.
In my image before, I think Japanese work very hard, but in fact, not so.
The entertainment industry is very different here. It's all about the customer, and it's not about getting tips. Coming from North America, you do something because you tip her. Better service. She's a big tipper. Smile a little more. Here it's just, when you're hired to do something, you make sure the customer goes home happy.
Okay. This is my house, right? This is an ad I got. This is before and after Reformation. So this is my house is before.
I had a romantic idea about minkas, the traditional farmhouses, which I thought were absolutely beautiful. And my students and friends would laugh at me. They said, "Why do you live in a ransackled old farmhouse? Don't you want to have a cement condominium?"
When I first came to Japan, I had this dream of living in an all-Japanese house. The really old type, the Tanizaki in praise of shadows type house. And we actually found that house and lived in it for 20 years. And it's very beautiful and very Japanese, and I'm sure, you know, if you're Junichiro Tanizaki, you're going to love it. But it's very, very hard lifestyle living in one of those old houses. And at this time of year, it's just completely dark. And depressing, very depressing.
One can still find that tradition in Japan, but you have to look hard and fast, and only gaijin are only interested. The Japanese say it's too cold, it's too dirty, it's too hard.
Still there are many, but Kyoto, after the war, Kyoto was almost entirely made up of wooden houses.
The Japanese embrace their past, they respect it, they love it, but they don't understand how to preserve it, in the sense that perhaps the Europeans would preserve their central downtown area to have a consistent architectural theme.
The traditional old Japanese buildings are made of wood, and until now most of them just burned down or fell down during an earthquake. So these concrete buildings make sense. They are very stable against earthquakes, so almost nothing can happen. They are ugly, but they are safe.
I'm standing in an old street in Nishijin in Kyoto. Narrow streets with old houses. The house I'm standing in front of is about 80 years old, maybe older, and almost identical to the house that was next door until a few months ago it was torn down. This is a photograph of the house next door from this point on. I tried to buy this house that was torn down next door, and last year in the early spring I couldn't get the loan, and it broke my heart. The owner wanted to sell the property. It was bought by a developer, it was torn down, and then a new house was built. I suspect that the new house will be gone in the future, and this old house behind me may still be standing if somebody buys it and preserves it. So what I wanted to do, my dream was to buy a traditional Kyoto machiya. Plastic. If you listen, you can hear the sound of silk loom weaving, mechanical weaving loom down the street, one of the houses similar to this house.
I don't know any foreigners here that work as English teachers. I know one that's doing well, one. And he has about 400 students and 3 schools in Osaka, and he's doing very well. But he worked very hard to get to that level. Whereas a lot of these others complain about how these schools like Nova and so forth, but to get to any level like that, you have to work hard. You cannot sit on your ass and expect it to happen for you. And I don't know why a lot of these people here seem to get bitter by the fact that it doesn't work for them.
You know, we live in a city with 1,600 temples, 400 shrines, 17 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. That's just Kyoto.
One of the things I found, though, when I was living in the temple is that I missed a feminine principle. It was very stoic. In Japan, all the gods are male, all the deities are male. And they have one who's Keno, who's the one for grace and love, but that's actually a transvestite. It's a male god from India that they've added breasts and include babies sometimes. So it was really, I missed the Mary aspect of theology. I missed the warmth. So I said, well, basically I need a woman, and found one, made 2 babies, and I've been here ever since.
The details when you do tea ceremony, like your hand has to wave in a certain fashion, and you have to bow so many times, and you have to do it in a certain fashion. So every small movement has a very specific way in which you should do it. So yeah, That's quite fun. Very typical Japanese. Dun, 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 straight, yeah.
There's a sense of looking for a way to recognize your difference in very specific patterns. Every prefecture has to have its special food, its special landmark, and everyone in Japan will refer to those specific things. So everybody in Kyoto knows those special temples, and it's polite when somebody's from Kyoto to ask about those specific temples and about specific Kyoto dialectical phrases. And you don't want to embarrass anybody by asking them about a temple they might not have seen or heard of. We go through a lot of trouble here in Japan. I'm not trying to get anybody embarrassed.
People are generally considerate of other people and people try not to bother each other. They make an effort to do that, and there's not much aggression really, and I think that's nice.
Owning an establishment, I don't have to have the top security of the world. I have a little latch on my door, which I know no one's going to break it down and bust in. And I mean, even my establishment, we don't have a bouncer. My wife is 5'4", pretty tough, but not as tough as a 6'4", 280-pound bouncer would be. So that's one reason why a lot of the places in Kyoto, especially, are by introduction only for security reasons, not so snobby reasons. We don't accept credit card here. We know the person. We send a bill in the mail. We know they're going to pay it back. If they don't, the person who gave them the introduction will be responsible. Ichigensa no kotowari is what they call it. First-time visitors are refused.
I think Japan has affected how I think and act much more probably than I recognize.
At home I told to my parents, you are too aggressive, I cannot stand you. Then I went to Bologna and I found the same. So I thought, okay, it's not just my parents aggressive, all the Italians are like that.
I do find Westerners obnoxiously loud and ridiculously self-centered.
I love my life here. I really love my life here. I think coming to Japan was the best decision I could have made at that time in my life.
I have a friend who said, Japan been good to me. And I would just have to echo that. That would be how I would summarize my experience here. Japan been good to me.
Although we survive and we function perfectly in our daily lives, there's this vast undercurrent of activity that we will never know what is happening.
Somehow you can be part of it, but there's still, you're a foreigner there, so there's still like a bit of a wall.
Some non-Japanese people here can't stand that. They leave because of that, I think. They need to know what's going on and have some grasp of the deeper parts of society. And when they realize that they're not going to get that, then time to leave.
静かな瞳が語っているのは優しい、それだけでいいね。踊りましょう、踊りましょう。あなたと朝が来るまで、目の前のあなたのことこのままどうか愛させてちょうだい。ただの偶然か巡り合わせが運命、ここで会った好きな色は何、好きな季節は、生まれはどこ、夢はある。踊りましょう、踊りましょう。あなたと朝が来るまで、目の前のあなたのことこのままどうか愛させて踊りましょう、踊りましょう。踊りましょう、踊りましょう。踊りましょう、踊りましょう。踊りましょう、踊りましょう。
Back to my life in Australia. But as time wore on, Japan became more home and Australia became more of a distant memory.
Didn't really have that much life experience, so I wanted to travel around the world first. However, my journey around the world did not continue after Japan, and here I am, 16 and a half years later.
Japan always had a certain exotic allure. It all started with ninjas. When I was 6, the concept of ninjas just seemed so cool, and that kind of was the doorway to being interested in Japan.
I was doing an anthropology class at university. I interviewed probably 4 or 5 people. Some of them were studying in Japan at the time, and some of them had studied. And just listening to their stories, especially the person who studied here in Kyushu, she's showing me these photo albums, and I thought, wow, that looks really fun. So I came to Japan through that international program at first.
I was doing semester at sea, which is a program done by University of Virginia, and you sail around the world taking classes with different professors on a giant cruise ship. We were supposed to dock in Kobe, and there was the Hanshin earthquake, so the entire port got destroyed, and luckily we were able to dock in Osaka. And after that I went to Kyoto for 2 days and got to wander around Kyoto and Arashiyama and stuff.
Sailor Moon and sumo are the base, the main reason why I'm here right now.
I heard that Santa Claus lived in Japan, and so I wanted to come here and see if I could find the real Santa Claus.
I wanted to learn an Asian language, non-alphabet language. So it was really between China and Japan Japan seemed a lot easier.
After having promised my wife, who was just fiancée at that time, that I had a job and she should come back to Australia, and that job fell through, I felt obliged to at least come to Japan for a short time. And initially I thought 6 months or a year I'd stay here, then go back.
We certainly don't like authority, and we don't like to be told what to do. So, Japan wouldn't be the natural place to be, would it?
Wow, okay, it's a place I'd really like to come back to.
I suppose it was the idea that there were these really pretty girls that you could meet who were open to make friends with a foreigner who spoke English and get paid to do it, which is mostly true. So I had that idea because David told me. He visited Vancouver, he told me, come to Japan, teach pretty girls, and take pictures and try it. And so I did, and that was 19 years ago.
The very first time I came to Japan was about 15 years ago for my previous job. And I came a few times, so slowly this country started to be very interesting to me. And in that period of time I met a Japanese girl, and then we moved to Italy and we lived almost 8 years together. So I had many chances to come to Japan, so it was a smooth and long approach to the country. So 3 years ago, after unfortunately I broke up with this lady, I decided it was time to try to live in Japan, not just spending vacation or coming here for a short visit.
I fell in love with a Japanese man and I wanted to be with him. And I was interested in living in another country, so I said, okay, I'm coming.
I came here to teach literature and Italian language to a university.
In some rather old-fashioned Japanesey English, they say, "What is your purpose in coming to Japan?" I used to tell the truth. I used to say, well, I was kind of economic refugee, a political refugee. But I always felt that Japanese people felt a little disappointed. I think they hoped that I would say that I deeply respect the finer points of Japanese culture and all that. So I always felt a bit bad. So I thought, well, what can I say that's actually the truth, but will leave them feeling good? And finally, after a decade or so living here, I finally stumbled across the correct answer that satisfied everybody. So I thought, what is your purpose in coming to Japan? I said, I have a fetish for long black hair. And the Japanese people would always go, I see.
Oh no, there's a foreigner in here.
It's just going to be a one-year trip, but